Walmart, student loans, and a great political comeback story. Here to talk business and politics is our Northwest Arkansas contributor, morning anchor for KNWA, J.R. Davis. Good to have you with us, J.R. As always, we appreciate you joining us for our newscast.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me, Roby. Appreciate that.
Let's talk about the new Walmart CEO-elect, Doug McMillan. What do we know about Doug McMillan? He's been running the Walmart International division. He's a kind of a young guy, but why was he selected to be CEO, do you think? What do we know about him?
Well, I think what we know about him first and foremost is that he's kind of a Walmart lifer. He started his career with Walmart back in 1990 over in Tulsa, and has kind of touched on every aspect of Walmart over the last 23 years or so, before obviously being named CEO of Walmart. And from everything I'm hearing, Roby, this was something that was kind of known, especially to those in the inner circle of Walmart, kind of the heir apparent, if you will.
Yeah, you're mentioning kind of the reaction to his selection. I think that we were not necessarily surprised that he was picked. It was probably going to be him or Bill Simon, who heads up Walmart's U.S. division. But the timing still was kind of a surprise. I don't think any of us thought we would wake up on Monday morning, the week of Thanksgiving, and hear that Walmart had selected a new CEO. Kind of, what was some of the reaction locally?
Well, locally, it's actually funny. I want to hit on kind of the national network scene first, because I was kind of surprised as I was looking around some of the national news networks and the business networks talking about the surprise, if you will, about McMillan being named the CEO. I don't think there was that much surprise as kind of you were alluding to there. McMillan, he's 47 years old. He's a young guy. He's been with Walmart since 1990. Simon came on from Brinker International back in 2006. He's not necessarily a Walmart guy, but I don't think it was a huge shock to a lot of people locally that McMillan was named the successor to Mike Duke. And as far as timing goes, if you look back, November 21st, 2008 was when Mike Duke was announced to replace Lee Scott at at Walmart in Bentonville, Arkansas. And of course, he took over February 1, which is exactly what McMillan is doing for Duke. February 1. So it may seem a little weird going into the holiday shopping season, the busiest time for Walmart as well as other retailers. But the timing's not all that surprising, because this is exactly what we saw with Duke taking over for Scott.
Yeah, and obviously February 1st is the beginning of really a retailer's fiscal year, because they actually run kind of a month behind, so they can get all those Christmas sales in their January books. Other interesting thing I thought too about Doug McMillan is that he's a guy, he grew up in Jonesboro, and like you said, his early career, he started in the Walmart, I think he was a stocker at one point in time, wasn't he?
Yeah, well, you know, it's one of those things, Roby, where you've seen a lot of these stories before with people starting off at the very, I don't want to say bottom, but when you entry-level position at Walmart and slowly climb and get to where they eventually go with the Walmart stores. But you know, again, yeah, this is a kind of a success story, if you will. He's worked his way up. Simon's someone who came in 2006. He kind of took over from what we saw with Eduardo Castro, right? You know, he was ahead of U.S. sales in Walmart. It didn't go so well, so they saw Simon be brought in from 2006. Kind of to necessarily kind of right the ship U.S.-wise, and then you see McMillan, who's done a pretty good job internationally for Walmart. And again, you've seen it from 1990, as you talked about being a stalker, and then working his way up to now being named the next CEO of Walmart. It's a pretty incredible story. But again, as far as local goes, I don't think there was a whole lot of surprise here. He was very close to the Walton family, and on very good terms with the Board of Trustees with Walmart. So again, this was something that maybe to the outside community was a bit of a surprise, but as far as Walmart, not so much.
All right, I'll be counting on you to get that exclusive interview with him going forward. Let's shift gears. Talk about another big story you've produced this past week or two on student loans. Costs rising faster than even healthcare costs, which usually stuns us. What's the big driver of these rising student loan costs and the rising cost of going to higher education institutions?
Well, it's hard to put one finger on what exactly is driving costs, but I think most people out there, if you just kind of pay attention to the news coverage, I think it's the fact that the availability of student loans is so easy to get. Students, anybody, which is not necessarily a bad thing, but anybody that wants to go to school can go to school, and there are those loans out there, those federal loans, so to speak, to be able to go to the school of your choice to a certain extent, and not necessarily everybody maybe should go to college, or maybe not everyone should go to school for a particular program. I think as long as those financial availabilities are there, universities, colleges, whether it be private, public, or two-year institutions, are able to kind of control that demand, if you will, that cost. And I think that's probably the biggest driver of college loan or at least tuition, especially the college loan debt. The other, though, is something that people necessarily don't want to admit all the time, but I think it's savings. Roby, in the last 5 years, families have gone from paying 37% out of pocket to 27% out of pocket. That's just 5 years. Of course, that's going to drive debt. So I think it's something that's very important for families to begin to start saving for college. It may start to go up, and we've seen it, inflation somewhere around 2%. We've seen tuition costs somewhere around 4 or 5% each year. But if you start saving for that now, then, I think you can definitely head that off in the end, no matter how much it expands each and every year.
And you threw out some ideas and some suggestions from some of the experts in your coverage to start saving early. Just as little as $25 a month can go a long way. Do you recall some of those numbers and just what somebody can kind of do simply to save early for college for their kids?
Yeah, actually I do. I'm terrible with numbers, but yeah, this one I actually do remember. If you start with your child, and this is not just when they're born, this is K through 12 education. So start when your kid's in kindergarten all the way until they graduate high school. And if you save about $25 a month with, say, and this is a 529 savings plan, which is, has some tax advantage to it. But if it, in return, has about 7%, you can save quite a bit of money. I don't have those figures right in front of me right now, Roby, but you can save enough money to pay for roughly 2 years of community college. And then in turn, if you can put enough, say $100 a month back over that same period of time with the same interest on that return, you can save enough for nearly 3 years, fully 3 years tuition and fees for a public university and 1 year of a private college tuition. So you can kind of do a little bit of both. But I mean, if you think about it, $25 a month to $100 a month, it's not that much to put back. So I think the emphasis falls on the parents right now and those families until Congress does something. And I think that's what we're going to see the next step with the reauthorization of the Higher Education Act. But we may not see anything come from that until, Obama's successor is in office.
All right, finally, great feature story in our latest issue of Talk Business, our magazine issue of Talk Business. You profiled former Attorney General Steve Clark. He's the head of the Fayetteville Chamber of Commerce now. Great story of redemption. I mean, this guy was, how many times was on the, his last leg almost after his fall from grace as a potential gubernatorial nominee in 1990. Tell me what your big takeaway or couple of takeaways were from this piece that you worked on.
Yeah, it was good that you said a couple of takeaways. I've got a ton of takeaways. And honestly, Roby, you're the one that kind of brought me this story in the first place. And it was something that you were interested in. And so I wanted to kind of delve into it. But I'll be honest, I knew of Steve Clark. I kind of knew the story of what happened back in the late 80s, early 90s. But I was really and truly just kind of in awe of his story once I kind of sat down and talked with him. I went over to his new, I say newer, headquarters over off of the Fayetteville Square in the Fayetteville Chamber of Commerce. He is the president there now. And we sat down for a couple hours and just talked about where his life went, where he went. I think the biggest takeaway I have, if you haven't already read the story, is just his persistence. And I can't tell you how many people I know that at some point along in that story would have just given up. But Steve Clark did not. Being one of the youngest attorney general in the nation at the time of his election, he was there 12 or so years, and then to have everything kind of just, really and truly just kind of implode upon him. And then he was left to start over. And kind of funny thing about that article is the fact that he was forced to start over so many times. It wasn't just, okay, you start over, you get everything you lost back. It was start over, get a little ways down the road, and then you have to start over again and get a little ways down the road. But it was really astonishing, and the fact that he, began his political career in Arkansas, fell off with everything that happened. And again, if you haven't read the article, I encourage you to do so. It's really an incredible story, just from his perspective, really, really incredible. But he went and he started his political career in Arkansas. Everything happened. Then he moved away from Arkansas and started a healthcare business. Went to a healthcare business.
I got to cut you off there, JR. We're running short on time for our segment here, but everybody can read that story at talkbusiness.net. JR did a great job with it. It's the story of redemption for Steve Clark. As always, my friend, thank you so much for your contributions to Talk Business, and we will catch up with you in a couple of weeks.